really pleased to be here for this really wonderful webinar and panel discussion with three wonderful women here to explore how women tech and are bridging the digital divide. It is a Humanitarian Exchange webinar here from the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, the HLA. I am going to be facilitating this conversation today. So my name is Lucy. I work at the Humanitarian Leadership Academy as the data and evidence specialist. So what my role involves is bringing together all of our data and technology kind of platforms, making sure that we're using connected insights and fostering a collaborative culture. And also my research focus on is exploring how digital data and technology is more inclusive, equitable and accessible and driven by local leadership. We're really pleased to have you all here. It's great to see that you're all already popping in the chat. It's really lovely to see so many people. So we are here to talk to some really amazing panelists. I'm very excited to hear from all three of them. And how their work is really bridging this digital divide and some of the challenges that we face in the digital data and technology kind of space within the humanitarian sector. I think it's really quite important to acknowledge that for now, at the moment, our sector is probably feeling quite brutalized. We're feeling probably a bit bruised and a bit sore, and it feels as if our sector is almost divided more than ever than it has been in the time that I've been working here, for sure. Our values are kind of under global attack. There are political, social, cultural divisions driving the communities that we work with into deeper states of crises. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that possibly quite a lot of emotions with people joining the call today. I know I've been feeling that over the last couple of months. But as I've been reflecting and going through my learning journey over the last sort of 2 to 3 months, I've always come back to that core concept that there is always hope. And with shocks as deep as some of the ones that we've been having and grappling with, we have the opportunity to shine a light on where there are areas of hope. And I think that's what I really want to bring today, to shine a light on some of the solutions that are in our sector, but actually actively engaging to narrow those divisions that we might be feeling and we might be seeing. So with it being International Women's Day on Saturday the 8th of March, which is an international day of solidarity to celebrate the diversity and the kind of unique successes and perspectives that women and girls across the world have, we wanted to take a moment to celebrate some wonderful women working in humanitarian and technology who are bringing hope, inclusion and accessibility for many people around the world through their innovation and through their work. So we're specifically focusing on digital and data innovations, most of which will support women and girls as well as the wider humanitarian community. And I think it's really important to kind of explore how the humanitarian technology sectors intersect and how this presents an opportunity to really bridge the divide between different types of humanitarian workers, different types of communities that are affected by crises, to really foster locally led humanitarian action. That's what I'm hoping to really kind of bring it back to today when we speak to our panelists. Their work is incredibly exciting. So we will start things quite surely by hearing from our panelists. Excuse me, sorry. We will be having a 25-minute discussion after we've heard from each of them. They've come with presentations. Throughout these conversations, please do use the Q&A function on your screens to submit questions. I'll be keeping an eye on these as they come in and trying to group them. What would really help myself and our panel is if with your questions you can sort of say who you're asking the question to. so that I can direct it to the most appropriate person to respond to. And also, if you can, I'm not quite sure if we set up, but if you can like questions in the Q&A, so what we know what questions are more important, we can come to those and prioritise them. We have 25 minutes at the end for question and answers, so we do want to get to as many as we possibly can. So just before we kick off, I've got a bit of housekeeping. So we are recording this session, and we do share the recording and the slides after the session. We will probably be sending those out tomorrow, so don't worry if you miss anything. We are able to translate using the captions functions. I can already see a couple of questions come in around language. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a button that says, it's kind of like a box with CC in it. And if you turn show captions on, it does have the abilities to select the language that you speak and that you read, so that you can engage with this in a way that's accessible for yourselves. So please do use that. You'll also be able to claim a HPass badge to sort of showcase your attendance at this event. It is a learning exchange session, so do keep an eye on your emails probably in the next week or so for more information on how to claim this. That will be coming out from our wonderful HPass team. Do use the chat for reflections and reactions. I will be sort of keeping an eye on it. I won't be able to respond to any questions. If you can please keep them coming in through the Q&A function. So I think that's it from me. I'm going to take a pause. And I am going to start handing over to our wonderful panellists. So I'd like to thank, first of all, Karin, Kat and Angelina for being here with us today, for giving up your time and energy to be with us. I've had a sneak peek of what you'll be talking about and I am very excited. So Angelina, would you like to kick us off? Would you like to get started?
Yes, Lucy. Thanks a lot for that introduction. I hope I'm clear. Where I am, the connection is not the best. I'm hoping it will behave. I really like the introduction that you just gave it. It's like, it's very real. Thanks a lot for being real. Yeah, so you can just start us off with my presentation. If you can just share kindly. As Lucy's doing that, I can just I can just start. It's a pleasure to have like the 65 of you here. Really, this means a lot. And I think I did this last year with with another set of people, and I think some of you are also there. So it's a pleasure to do it. Lucy, would you like me to just present? Fine.
I'm getting there with the slides. Apologies, I thought I had them on share already.
No worries.
Always a tech issue somewhere.
Yep. I can just start with someone so that we don't like waste too much time or rather lose time.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries, Lucy. Thanks a lot. So yeah, my name is Angelina Ndung'u. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya, but currently I am in Machakos, which is just like an hour from Nairobi. I am here because as an individual, I represent I'm here to represent myself as an individual and also talk about the theme of today, which is women, tech and bridging the digital divide. So my background is in project management. Thanks a lot for Stacey. My background is in project management, software engineering, and what's it called? UX research. If I can just share a short story, how I started off. I grew up in a home where we had my parents being entrepreneurs and farmers. And so I thought that's what I'd become, a managing director running a big company here in Kenya or in Africa. But after some time, I decided, you know what, I think tech made sense. And anyway, my brothers had already joined tech. So I thought as a tomboy, if I wanted to really like have a chance with, with the industry, I needed to do what my brothers were doing. So I joined software engineering. which was great. But after some time, I realized that for me, because I'm a feeler and someone who really cares about how I present myself or whatever technology, however technology is presented, I found myself being more focused on the human-computer interaction side of technology, right? So also for that to work, I realized that also part of what software engineering covers is project management. Like, how do you manage projects depending on the locality or the communities that you're covering. So project management made sense to to do that. And after some years of of working in these areas, working in the corporate sector, for me it was not making too much sense. In terms of you deliver a project, you're paid and all that, and being in Kenya, humanitarian sector is really huge here. And for me, I thought, through the project management institute, actually, I thought it made more sense if I applied my skill set to the humanitarian world. And so I remember the first project I joined was something that was called Maji. Maji was a platform that was just trying to advocate for issues to do with water in Kenya. I have not listed it here, but it's actually one of the first projects that I worked in. I joined in as a program assistant with a tech, edge. And I remember, I think for me, that's where I saw the real divide when it comes to tech, in terms of the accessibility of even the platforms that we were building to the persons that we were targeting. So we had this platform called, it was actually called Majibu. In Kenya, in Swahili, Maji means water. Majibu means answer. So it was water, answers to do with water, right? And I think I realized that we were building a platform, but the people who were supposed to be using it in order to to raise their issues could not access it. That was about 2013. That's I think 10 years ago. I realized that there was such an issue in terms of technology, but we still went on, and quickly I remember the person who was leading the program actually deciding that maybe it made more sense for us to move on from using web technologies and actually move on to USSD, which was a bit of would have looked like we were going back, but it made more sense to have the women who you know how it is. Women are the ones who will be working on with their kids after school, to wash clothes, to wash to cook and everything, have their issues reflected or rather captured through USSD on their hybrid phones or just feature phones. So I think that was my first experience. I don't know how I forgot to add it here, but I think that was my first experience, just seeing that divide. And recently, now if I can just jump into this, recently I was also just working with Kujalink, which is a project by ADESO, African Development Solutions. And the platform was about overseeing personally, I was overseeing the development of the platform, especially around localizing it in not just Kenya. Kenya was big because anyway we were here, but also localizing it to the global south. And the whole point of the platform was to connect funders from the global north and organizations, CSOs, and mainly the ones who are not too grassroots, but the ones in the middle, such that they could be able to access this support from the global south. And I think for me, you'll see the lessons that I picked up from there. And I think this is another area, like I said, that made me really think about what I was doing as an individual, as a professional. Also, earlier on, I was working with Kenya. Kenya is the Kenya National Innovation Agency. And we were working to just build policy frameworks to drive innovation and inclusion in the country. Again, doing this, it just highlights a lot of, of the issues that exist. And unfortunately, this sometimes sounds like a cliche, but when you're talking about women, the divide is bigger. Whether we like it or not, that's just how it is. Also, earlier on, I worked with WordReader. I added WordReader and SoccerWatch because it's very related, because that had to do with a lot of the UX research work that I've done. WordReader, we were doing a research just to understand how women and girls, use the platform and the barriers that exist and the factors that influence those barriers. Again, we saw a lot of accessibility, digital literacy, just even how social norms are and socioeconomic factors are. And but I think we have a report online on that called ANASOMA digital report. ANASOMA, ANASOMA digital report, but it's just, again, building digital solutions for, that were featuring women. And again, Wasoko is now Wasoko. That time it was Sokowatch. It is a for-profit startup. And Wasoko is still solving the issue of, of bridging the gap between the FMCG companies to how goods get to the final user. And again, there you interact with women, a lot of women, because for anyone in Kenya, we call them Mama Mboga. So these are the ones who, who sell us the flour, the ones who sell us the milk and the sugar next, to where we live. So again, a lot of influence, a lot of influence in terms of, their background influence how they access these solutions. And then also I did some work a bit earlier at Refugees United, RefUnite. So here we were using technology to help refugees and displaced persons connect. And here we saw again a lot of this, the digital divide, as we would call it, especially when you consider a woman in Syria who's trying to connect with her son, who has moved on maybe to the US, has gotten asylum opportunities in the US. I know right now there's the whole conversation around there, so it's a bit, I know, sensitive. But yeah, you can imagine that person trying to connect on a platform. And imagine also another lady or girl in Somalia or in South Sudan trying to connect again with a son or a daughter or a husband or a wife somewhere else. And again, we also saw how we needed, to sometimes downscale our work, moving on maybe from these very fancy technologies that we had started with, moving on to, USSD a lot, of course, facing the issue and also the issues of language, because when you talk about your USSD and SMS, it's really tricky when it comes to Arabic, because how we type. In English, we type like this, Arabic, we type like this. So yeah, this is just some of my experience. If you can just move on to the next slide, please. I'm seeing your questions. Thanks a lot. So yeah, key lessons from implementing digital solutions. I've already mentioned some, like, a lot of, what we call pivoting, where you start off really fancy with all the technology, with all these amazing experts to build this technology for the target audiences. And then you realize, what, that's not working. You have to actually sometimes, downscale and use technologies that are not so fancy in order to, to actually serve the person that you're targeting. Yeah, so I mentioned that in point number 3, if I can just jump to point number 3, that these systems need to be dynamic and ever evolving in order to support local context. At KujaLink, we realized that we needed something that was sustainable, scalable, and also that could fit that local context. And I remember at KujaLink, one of the ways we did this is as we were mapping the different CSOs, right? Working very closely with organizations like NIA. NIA is a humanitarian and development advocacy network. We realized that actually we were using a lot we were using to build the platform was based on what our funders knew. But getting on the ground, we're realizing that we actually didn't really understand what was on the ground. And so just changing that way of thinking, mindset, and then translating that into KujaLink, honestly would got our team storming a lot. But I'm happy to say that after some time we realized that we needed to start with content, right? Just specifically for this, we needed to start with content. Was there a way that we could be able to have our target audiences putting in their content into our platform, and through that we would somehow be able to to adjust the platform as we moved along. We also noticed that right now I know there's a lot of mapping. We are mapping organizations so that we can know how they are, so that we are mapping needs and everything. And one of the lessons that I walked away with and my team walked away with was mapping needs to be dynamic. Is there a way that you can provide the first set of technology or content, and then have the team, the people on the ground be updating it? I know my time is almost up, so yeah, the other key lesson that we walked away with is overlooking professionalism and ethical leadership. you cannot overlook professionalism and ethical leadership, basically. That, I know we are in the humanitarian context and sometimes it's emergencies, but we learned that we needed to just uphold existing frameworks, like in project management, there are already frameworks that exist. In software engineering, there are frameworks that exist. And we had to learn that, these were actually built to help us in this emergency. The good thing about them is that you could be able to scale them and repeat them when you needed to repeat them. Also, we also learned about collaboration and versus competition, which is what literally this session is about. Like, just getting the people who are doing different things into the room and just working very closely. And this is among teams, this is among partners and all that. Yeah, and then another lesson that we learned was about inclusivity and representation barriers. Yeah, I mentioned a bit about, when we were building a USSD platform and we realized that, building that for Arabic was a bit tricky than for English. So just assuming that it was going to work the same made us experience some issues. And also connectivity and digital connectivity and of course digital literacy. I think this one I mentioned a bit earlier. But for us, what worked, what the lesson we walked away was just continuous engagement through webinars and personalized one-on-ones. Because sometimes webinars don't work for everyone, but you can actually personalize one-on-one. I remember when our CTO at the time joined, and he was just going through the lessons that we had, and he was like, "Can I just meet 3 of these CSOs?" And they actually met in our office in Nairobi at Kujalink. And interesting thing was that we thought that we had captured all the learnings about CSOs in terms of the funding they had received through the platform. And at that point, we were thinking like nobody had received funding, only to realize that someone had actually received funding through Kujalink, but we never knew because they started the conversation there and took it away from the platform. So again, this was a fresh set of feedback that we could use to improve our platform in order to capture such. And then receptivity of funders. I normally say that when you're working in the humanitarian sector, you have to be an advocate that regardless of who you are or what level you are, when you meet a funder, can you make your case? Can you teach that funder something? Because at the end of the day, we need this funding. So for us, we realized that we needed to really be the ones who are educating the funders and everybody else. Yeah, sorry guys, I think I've become taken away by this. So questions later, but right now let me just pass it on to Karin. Thanks a lot, Lucy and the team. Yeah, Karin, please.
Thanks, Angelina. And Karin, I know you've got some slides that you want to share with us as well, so thank you very much.
Yes, and we've practiced this before, but there's a big chance that this won't work, as it always happens. So let me just see if I can also, I don't know if I can make it, can't make it big, for instance. You can't probably see it in full screen, can you?
I can, but I can also see the panelists on the side of my screen. I don't know if that's just because of how I've configured it. I think there's a couple of comments in the chat saying that it looks good. It's okay.
So excellent. Okay. Well, yeah. I can't see any of you guys, so just shout in an impolite way if I'm going off track. Great. So hi, everyone. My name is Karin. I'm the CEO of an organization called Data Friendly Space. Quickly about me, before I talk about the organization I work at, I've spent about 15 years of my life in the humanitarian sector with various organizations. I started with Save the Children. I've worked with Finchurch Aid. I am educated in the humanitarian and conflict response sort of sphere. But before joining Data Friendly Space, I was a part of a team that set up the Estonian development agency called the Estonian Center for International Development. I'm Estonian, tuning in from Tallinn today. And many of you might not know that Estonia is actually quite proud of their digital government and digital society journey. So a part of that agency was to, in fact, help developing governments with their digital transformation journeys, particularly in the public sector. I was there for a couple of years and really missed the humanitarian sector, so I came across this great organization called Data Friendly Space that combines data and technology with specifically the humanitarian sector. So a couple of years later, here I am. So a little bit about what we do. So we are a relatively small team of about 25, 30 people, a mixture of humanitarians, data analysts, technologists, and engineers. And we call ourselves a data and technology nonprofit. We develop open source, hopefully accessible, open platforms for humanitarian organizations to analyze their data better, to examine and analyze the data that is around us, the secondary data that none of us often have the time to go through and read. A lot of our technologies today are also powered by artificial intelligence. So in a way, we are dealing and addressing a slightly different digital gap, which is a digital gap between smaller, often local organizations and larger, more capable international organizations. And we do this by trying to make technology accessible and data accessible in the humanitarian sector. So we do this in a few ways. We started working at Data Friendly Space about 8-9 years ago when the Nepal earthquake happened, in 2015, I believe it was. And one of the first tools that we developed, and is still very popular today, and by the way, there is a Kaya course on the data entry and exploration platform, Deep. So go and check it out if you are interested. So the data entry and exploration platform is a joint open source initiative, so all of you guys can go ahead and use it. And it's an online platform that supports humanitarian analysis that is collaborative. So you can have several organizations working together on an analytical framework and an analytical process. And it focuses on qualitative data that is unstructured and often really hard to make use of. So there are a lot of different things you can do there. You can do secondary data review. You can do some media monitoring, protection analysis, operational learning. Yeah, it's a place where we make sense of the qualitative, unstructured, the heaps of information that surrounds us. And it allows us through different analytical steps to get to the storyline or get to the data that would be in any way actionable and simple to share and action. So there are a few things that we are solving with artificial intelligence on Deep. And I guess I can summarize it all in trying to build efficiency into the analysis process and trying to make the process a little less complex. So those of you that have dipped their toe in the data analysis world, particularly in the humanitarian sector, know that there are hundreds of different analytical frameworks, depending on what you are interested in, whether it's a specific sector, whether it's a specific vulnerable group. And there's massive volumes of unstructured data. I mean, you type in Sudan or you type in Ukraine into ReliefWeb. Today, you get tens of thousands of reports that we don't often manage to shrink down to actionable information. And of course, there's need for collaboration of data and analysis support. And all of these steps can be taken by using the data entry and exploration platform and some of the artificial intelligence powered features that help speed this up and make the entire data extraction and analysis process a little less manual. But then with the I guess heyday of generative AI, which some of you may have heard of, last year, we realized at Data Friendly Space that actually we have today the power to grasp much more real-time information and also build platforms that are much more easier for both non-analysts, so those like me and probably many of you, those that simply are humanitarians that want up-to-date information really rapidly, structured in a way that is incredibly easy to use and share with your colleagues and inform your proposals or your annual planning. So that's when we came up with our initiative called GANIT, which is Data Friendly Spaces Generative AI Initiative. We call it AI for Humanitarians by Humanitarians because we have quite a strong human in the loop process in all the outputs that GANIT produces. Again, I'll link the different links at the end of my presentation, so all of you guys can go today and check these platforms out and let us know if it suits your use case or if it gives you the kind of information, real-time information that you are looking for. What we are trying to solve with GANIT is that we know that even when we look at experienced humanitarian data analysts, without any artificial intelligence support, without any technology support, they usually spend 90% of their time searching and extracting data, and only 10% of their time analyzing that data, trying to figure out how that fits with what they are trying to do, what their beneficiaries needs, and trying to make it actionable. So can you imagine if 90% is what an experienced humanitarian data analyst takes, then imagine people like you or me that may not be experienced data analysts. So basically, you would spend all your days trying to find these reliable sources of data. So what GANIT does today, it has a couple of tools under it. I'm going to demonstrate one shortly. There's a collaborative knowledge hub. So when we think about these open tools like the ChatGPTs and Claudes, they crawl web. We often say that they tend to hallucinate or they're not explainable. We don't understand where they're pulling their information from. Well, GANIT's virtual assistant is very different. We have curated GANIT's database, working with humanitarian organizations. Please also give us feedback of putting together a very curated, well-balanced, bias-aware data set of humanitarian sources that we all as humanitarians rely on. It might be more reliable media. It might be places where all of you guys upload your field assessments publicly for everyone to see. So whenever you query GANIT's virtual assistant, you know that it is really safe and it is pulling information only from places where we as humanitarians look and where we post our information. So the AI-powered virtual assistant, I'm going to show in a second. GANIT Situation Hub is another tool under the GANIT initiative that we launched about, I want to say 4 or 5 months ago. It's a way for us to help people that are not comfortable with prompting and querying the virtual assistant and asking it questions, but rather it already automatically pre-populates a very thorough weekly situation report on various crises around the world. So I don't have a lot of time, but I don't know, hopefully you can see the video, but essentially this is what GANIT's virtual assistant looks like. You can filter it by country, you can filter it by the source of either news or field reports or assessments, and you can ask it very sort of humanitarian focused, nuanced questions. It updates the database behind it, updates itself several times a day. So you will get the most recent information about what you are querying in your area. And what's really helpful about GANIT also is that it gives you the sources, as you can see at the bottom. So if you don't trust the system, which is also totally fine, then you can go and check this out yourself. So again, this is available whether you are an international organization, whether you're a local organization. Please go and check it out and let us know how we're doing. And very quickly also, with all of these tools that we've built, our data analyst team is able to generate both rapid onset analysis in crisis, do risk analysis and scenario building, but also build really comprehensive situational analysis in humanitarian crisis. If you want to check out the tools, please go ahead and start using them, give us feedback, and yeah, happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karin. On a personal note, GANIT in the last few months has saved me hours of time, so thank you. Kat, it would be lovely to hear from you and an overview of your work with Jangala.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Kat. I'm the Impact and Advocacy at Jangala. First of all, can everyone see my slides? Can someone wave if they're not available? Okay, we're getting nods. This is good. Yeah, Jangala, we're a humanitarian tech charity. And what we do is we build technology that gets people connected to the internet. And we're aiming to get 4 million people connected by 2030. So I'm going to share with you today a little bit about who we are and a little bit about some of our projects and the impact that we've had so far. So where did we come from? We came from 3 volunteers going to northern France. They were going to refugee camps in 2015. And they discovered that people needed their essentials. They needed food and water and shelter and safety, but they also needed internet. People were desperate to speak to their family back home and to get news from their home country. And so they built a rough Wi-Fi connection solution. And from that, we've developed into the charity that we are today. And what we do is we build technology that we send out across the world with the aim to get people connected. And so far, we've connected 100,000 people in 36 countries. To put our work in context, the challenge that we're facing is that there's about 2.6 billion people who aren't connected to the internet. And in an education space, there's about 2.7 million schools that aren't connected to the internet. And in the context of International Women's Day this weekend, there's also a gender disparity there. So there's about 62% of men versus 57% of women who are connected. And there's some statistics that show that there's 19% of women in less developed countries are connected versus 86% in developed world. Not my terminology. I would prefer not to use that, but that's just where the stats come from, so I have to be accurate. So yeah, so there's a big challenge of connectivity worldwide, but there's also a big challenge of gender disparity. So how does Jangala play into this? Well, we build technology. There's about 18 of us, and we beaver away in a workshop in North London, and we build these purple boxes that you can see on the left here. And these purple boxes get shipped out across the world. And what they do is they take a form of backhaul, so a SIM card or a satellite connection, and they turn it into a portable Wi-Fi solution. I'll tell you more about that in a sec. We also have Getbox. It's much smaller, gets fewer people online. We use that in the UK quite a lot and in some of our European deployments. A similar idea uses a SIM card to create a Wi-Fi connection that's portable and can go anywhere. And then we have a partner model. So you can see some end users from a Kapando school in Ghana. So we partner with organizations around the world, and it would be impossible to do the work we do without those partnerships. And that enables us to support refugee camps, education centres, schools, health clinics, emergency response teams, migration teams all around the world to get people connected. It's quite exciting actually to talk to you today because this has got a little star next to our 100,000 because we just tipped over it in the last week. So we've just reached 100,000 people, which is very exciting. And there's a snapshot of some of the countries we work in. So there's we work in Colombia, South Africa, Kenya, India, and also in the UK. And yeah, that's across loads of different types of scenarios. Yeah, across education, health. A lot of what we're trying to do is empowering local communities. We really believe that internet enables people to do the work that they can do better and more easily. And we're not trying to say how we think that should be done. It's very much about empowering local communities to build the networks that they need. And we believe that providing internet enables them to do that. So to bring that to life a bit for you, I've got a couple of examples of the work that we do, specifically supporting women and girls, so on a theme for today's event. There's a great organisation called ALIG, who we work with them in West Bengal. And what we've done is we sent them one big box. So the boxes are sort of this big and it's bright purple. And they've connected that to 10 desktops in a computer lab. And that means that 200 women each day can go and visit, and they're learning things like software engineering, programming, computer work, digital skills. And that's at like kind of all levels. And we think this work has impacted about 9,500 lives to date. And I've got, a nice quote from Arshad, who's our main contact there in ALIG. Says, "Thank you so much for the big boxes. They're really working great. There were many girls who didn't even know how to start a computer or a laptop, and giving them the opportunity to access the internet is a great help. Our ALEG partnership was actually a bit unusual. Normally we just sort of provide the connectivity and that's our main role. On this one, we also actually helped them with some educational materials to like teach people about what the internet was. And I've included a couple of snaps here today because I just think it's helpful to contextualize that work. So this is a slide that they use with their learners, and it's asking like, what is the internet? So we liken the internet to a giant encyclopedia or to a giant web that connects computers around the world. I think this is helpful to kind of envisage this idea of like discovering what the internet is for the first time. A lot of our work is helping people extend existing internet, but there are some people who are really learning about what it is for the first time. And I think that's important to hold in our minds when we talk about this. We also use the big box as a way to like, or lots of our partners use the big box as a way to engage users about how the internet works. So we kind of explain it as part of their digital education. And this is also educational material. So it's saying, here it is, it uses a SIM card, creates a Wi-Fi network, needs power. And then there's a nice diagram here of like a mobile cell tower that sends signals to the Jangala big box. And then that creates a Wi-Fi signal for your computer or your tablet or your mobile phone. These were created for children, but I actually think they're quite good explanations of how the big box works. And then another example I thought we could include today is about Peru. So we work with Latin American Foundation for the Future. We know them as LAF. And what that's doing is it's supporting women and girls who live up in the mountains. So LAF schools are in mountains that are about 2,000 meters high. It's quite difficult to get good connectivity there, especially through cables or wires. So this is a good solution for them because it enables them to get internet connectivity. And this is supporting women and girls who wouldn't necessarily be able to go to school where they are. They actually live on site during the week, and that's part of their educational process. And you can see in the picture on the right-hand side, you can see the big box top right is just sort of sitting in the corner and they've got their laptops connected. This is Bihes Thakora. She's our chair. She actually drew out something from research that we did recently, where one of our partners recently called our connectivity a powerful gift. And that's exactly what the internet at its best, a gift of opportunity, resilience, and hope. That's really what we see at Jangala. We believe that internet connectivity can provide people with greater access to information, resources, and connection. And that's part of the kind of vital role of the internet in today's world. Just quickly, I wanted to flash up our vision. So we believe that there's a good way to do this. We want to get 4 million people connected by 2030. We want to do that with our partners. We want to do that through innovation, through caring and sustainable practice. And if you happen to work for an organization or you know somebody who you think would really benefit from this type of connectivity, I encourage you to get in touch. One of the ways you can work with us is by being a partner. We work with big UN organizations and we also work with lots of very small grassroots organizations. So it's info@janga.lab, but you can also contact me afterwards. I'll just flash up. These are some of the people that we work with. And we'd love to hear from you and talk more. And that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kat. I just actually want to reflect back on that quote from your, was it Chief Executive Officer? About the chair, about it being a powerful gift and having hope, opportunity, and connection. I just think that is a really strong message that we should all be reminding ourselves, because I think sometimes, certainly for myself, I can get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of, oh, how does it work? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? But that is the why. So I really just wanted to take a moment and appreciate that. So thank you for sharing that particular quote with us. So we're going to have just a short conversation, and I guess I'm going to ask each of you, just reflecting back on what you've shared, the journeys that you've been through. I've kind of picked out that a lot of the kind of barriers are around, obvious one is funding, but also actually just sort of socialization of what your platforms are, what your tools are, what your experience has been. But I guess the question I do want to ask is the one that's on screen, and what has kind of been the main challenge that you have faced when kind of launching these tools and work, and what is needed to really keep accelerating progress? Because all of these tools and platforms are encouraging greater connection, greater sort of bringing people together. What's needed to keep that going? And actually, I'm going to ask each of you in turn as to how you spoke. So Angelina, if you don't mind, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I think for us, other than funding, of course, like you mentioned, it has been the uptake of the technology, right? I feel like it's something I'd added. I feel like the digital divide in the humanitarian sector is most felt by women and children, and also persons with disabilities, right? And I think for me, the platforms that I've had, the privilege and the opportunity, to work with, have kind of at first been built for the low-hanging fruit, and sometimes those are not, the target groups, And I feel like the challenges were now, somehow adapting to make these ones work for the. Like I feel like sometimes if you build technology that works, there's something that Kat has mentioned, that the presentation she was doing was for, for kids. I think you mentioned something like that. And, for me, it made a lot of sense, because sometimes I think if you can explain something and, a 6-year-old understands, then it's easier for you to roll out to, to other elder people. So I feel like for us, for me, the challenge has been that, taking something that has been built for someone who has all these privileges and helping make that work for someone who does not have, those privileges, access, all that. And yeah, and so like I mentioned, what's needed to accelerate, I feel like, just there's the issue I mentioned about policies. I mentioned about, mindsets of even the people who fund these technologies. Because if you're funding and, you find out that, the platform you're building is not doing what it's supposed to do, is the one funding you ready to just say, you know what, put that aside, build this thing? So I feel like that's needed. That's the mindset, starting from the most privileged to the one who doesn't have like as much privilege. Yeah, over to you, Lucy.
Nice, thank you. Karin, sorry.
Karin is fine. Yeah, so many challenges. I'm not going to focus on the technological ones. Maybe I'm more going to focus on the sector. Is from an artificial intelligence perspective, I think one of the biggest challenges is that the hype has been there for a year and a half. And I almost sometimes feel humanitarians are tired of talking about AI, and they've gotten tired before we've really even seen what it can do for us, and what it can really do to simplify and leapfrog our work. So I think that the biggest worry for me is that artificial intelligence becomes that hype word and that buzzword, and we don't actually focus on what's behind it. And hopefully there are a lot of great artificial intelligence powered initiatives out there today in the humanitarian sector. And I hope we all take a time to zoom in and think about how they work. Do we understand them? Do we feel like they're explainable, and how we can use them? Leadership is, I think, another big challenge. I believe that in the era of AI, we need a different type of humanitarian leadership. We need humanitarian leadership that doesn't sit on the fence and delay taking a decision of whether the organizations want to use this capability. If they want to use it, how do they do it safely? How do we set up guardrails? How do we capacity build our staff? Actually, the most drive for innovation and such comes today, at least towards data-friendly space, from middle management levels, where there's great eagerness and there's great. They relate to how much easier and how much more nuance AI-powered technologies can add to their data analysis or to the way they communicate with their beneficiaries. And I guess to accelerate progress, I think it's, again, not about technology. It's about how is this data used that we now have the power to extract and analyze incredibly quickly and incredibly powerfully from various sources? Are decision makers and are the leaders there, are they data oriented? Does the humanitarian organizations and the sector have a data culture? Do we actually have this path dependency and we kind of keep rolling out the same programs with maybe different numbers? And do we as a sector actually care about evidence and data? And I think that's going to be the real test case for whether these technologies thrive in the sector or not. Thanks.
Thank you. A lot of that resonates with me. Kat.
I think one of the key challenges we face is like a recognition of the size of the problem, specifically to do with connectivity. So humanitarian crises are happening in an increasingly digitized world. There's lots of things in humanitarian response that are dependent on internet, things like cash transfers, health services, education, migration assessments, emergency response, and people affected by crises also need internet connection because they need to talk to family and friends, they need to get information, they need to find services, translation, etc. So I think more and more internet connectivity is being seen as an essential part of kind of humanitarian work and as a right as well. And I think there's a growing recognition that reliable connectivity is, a massive challenge across the world. Connectivity is fragile, and we're seeing in contexts like Sudan and Gaza at the moment the impact of internet blackouts, power shortages, kind of damage to telecommunications infrastructure. And that has huge implications on the work that humanitarians do. It can impede aid, it can impede media reporting. And I think we're only just really beginning to understand the kind of huge psychological effects that come from being cut off from your digital self or being cut off from communication when the spectrum of our lives between online and offline have become very blurred. And that I think women are disproportionately affected by this. Women sit on the fault lines of lots of other inequalities, so it can become cyclical in terms of lack of connectivity. I think there's also kind of like a short term and a long term here. So kind of the immediate impact can be a challenge around humanitarian response, but the long-term impact is about kind of education and support and long-term equality. And I think that we really need these like rapidly deployable, affordable connectivity solutions. That's part of what Jangala is supporting. But I guess to the second part of the question, like what's needed to accelerate progress, for us, it's all about collaboration. So we are one of a much bigger ecosystem of actors that are tackling this challenge. People like GSMA and the ITU and the UNHCR, and I think this is building a foundation of kind of how can we support tech-driven aid. But for that to accelerate, we need really good collaboration. We do need funding, and we also need like a recognition of the kind of foundation level of this problem, and the kind of impact of not having it.
There we go. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when you outline it like that, it is quite remarkable to think how much of humanitarian work relies on understanding the need through data, but also relies on technology to deliver those cash transfers, to deliver health services, to translate work. And I think that when you outline it like that, it's really quite stark. And I guess there's I think, again, you put it quite nicely, Kat, in terms of laying the foundation for kind of like almost a mindset shift. And I'm just kind of going to reflect that back because Karin, you also mentioned around kind of like a new type of leadership that will be needed for humanitarian actors. And that, I think that really speaks to what you're all talking about here, in that we need to sort of take up tech a bit more. The divide is felt more disproportionately by women and girls and children. And again, Angelina, when you were talking about like the almost power dynamic, how do we make it work for those who are massively less privileged? Do you, this might be quite controversial, I hope not, but I think it's almost, do you see there kind of being an element of this needing to be embedded in how we as a humanitarian system innovate and respond to these crises more? Is there, Oh, I don't know where I'm trying to go with this. There's so much I want to unpack. But I think are we kind of looking at maybe, well, we need a mindset shift collectively? And I think, Kat, you mentioned around bringing in collaboration and partnerships. What are those partnerships, and what are those kind of things that we as a sector need to learn? That's a question. What is it we need to learn and collaborate with? Who do we need to be collaborating with? Did that make sense?
Was that for me, Lucy?
It can be for any of you. If you want to take it, that would be great.
Well, shall I start us off, and then maybe Karin,
that's
you
brilliant.
can come in. I think it is a mindset shift. I think that's an important way to think about it. I often compare digital adoption to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I know has become something of a political minefield recently. But 15 years ago, DEI sat in HR, and it was HR's thing, and it wasn't really on anybody else's radar particularly. And now it's kind of unthinkable that we wouldn't all have some form of DEI training or understanding, or particularly in recruitment practices, for example. And I think it's very much part of how the humanitarian sector thinks in lots of ways. I think digital is the same. Digital used to be that thing that sat in IT. It was, the IT department's challenge. And now it would be unthinkable to have any kind of worker, I think, who has no contact at all with some kind of IT technology, some kind of equipment, some kind of connection. But I think it takes time for those shifts to take hold. And I think it takes time for that kind of fundamental understanding of like the layer that this now underpins everything we do. So I think maybe that is some of the challenge, and we are seeing a shift, but I think it does take a bit of time.
Karin, do you want to come in as well?
I can. Yeah, lots there. I think one of the, and I don't know if I'm answering the question. I'm going to go for it anyway. I've spent the last 2 years talking to humanitarians about the threats, the opportunities, the challenges of artificial intelligence. And it's been quite interesting to see how in this process and in the dialogue that we have, how amongst humanitarians, we start to refer to these very dear terms to us, these terms of do no harm. How do we ensure do no harm applies to settings where we are using artificial intelligence? An incredibly valid question. But we shouldn't forget in this process that do no harm was actually a term that started because humans was not safe to humans. So I think one mindset shift that we definitely shouldn't have is to keep questioning technology, and we forget questioning ourselves in the process. So I would say that the humanitarian technology is almost as safe. It has to be as safe as humanitarians for humans. So how do we kind of bring that balance about? The other, almost an anecdotal scene I experienced the other day was that we talked about how to communicate to beneficiaries that some of the decisions that we've made on the aid that they received was supported through a data analysis that was done through artificial intelligence. And there was this group of humanitarians that said, we cannot do it. We have to tell them, this is exactly how we have to tell our beneficiaries AI was used. And then somebody in the audience asked, when was the last time you sat down with all of your beneficiaries and explained to them that certain reasons why they are getting food but not shoes was because the donor said that is what the priorities and that is what the money is for? So I think, again, how we are accountable to our beneficiaries and how we explain to them how the aid decisions came about need to be as well thought out in while we're using artificial intelligence, as well as if we're just using us and our human brains. So hopefully the challenges we have with AI will also force us as humanitarians to look in the mirror a little bit more and say, are we doing this well even without technology? So I think this is another mindset shift change that we maybe these technologies will help us grow as humanitarians as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, Angelina, did you want to have a final reflection before we move to Q&A?
Yeah. Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, like I'm just sitting here and thinking, we are having this conversation, but how can I keep it so real that it doesn't sound like, the usual conversations that happen? And I think that is something that Kat and Karin were alluding to. And I feel like at Adesso, I worked at Adesso, and I think it was one of the highlights of my career. Even living there, I left because I kind of needed a break. But I think this is a conversation that they were already having, and I feel many organizations and actors are already having. And there's one of the initiatives that Kujalink was working hand in hand with, which is, Pledge for Change, just getting leaders in the international NGOs to think about how they can pledge, to support local action, right? Local leadership, these partnerships, the way Karin is talking about, I'm speaking to beneficiaries and also hearing them out, And I think it's a whole thing. And there's a term we were using. We were talking a lot about decolonizing aid, that even as we build technologies, the movement starts a bit earlier. Technology is just, how we package this thing and deliver it. But it starts a bit earlier. It starts with that whole mindset. And it's bigger than just one organization. So I'm just going to use the word collaboration again. It is collaborative. What I am personally working on, what Karin, what you guys are working on, just looking at it, but also seeing a movement around that is driving that work, where we are not working in silos, but we are actually working towards one thing. And then also it becomes even more necessary for the humanitarian sector, like someone mentioned here. This is assistance and aid that is needed for the moment. It's not for resilience, it's not for, all those things are great, but we're talking about for the moment, then I feel for me, the mindset shift must happen. It will not be immediate, but there are already movements that are happening that we can all we can all join in and kind of start shaping our work towards, working alongside such. So I think that's what I'd say, which is basically just complementing what the rest of the panelists were saying.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's so much more that I'd love to delve into, but I have seen quite a few questions coming in for our audience, and I do want to give all of you the chance to have your voices heard. So I'm going to move straight into the Q&A. There's some really specific ones that I think make a lot of sense for Karin to take, but I do want to come to the first question that came in. I think, Angelina, you'd like to answer this. And it says, can specialised, this is from Hayam, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, can specialised digital platforms be developed for searching for missing persons in humanitarian crises?
I saw that question and I liked it, but maybe I would try to rephrase it a bit for myself so that I can be able to answer it. For me, I don't feel like it is can, and I feel the question is is it time for us to do that, right? Because the problem exists, and if this is a solution, then should we start? And even before we start, is there someone else already doing that? Is an organization that is already doing that? How can the insights that probably you have, Hayam, and how can the insights that you have, be plugged into that, or maybe just learn from the existing solution and just plug in your insights, and then we start from there. So I feel like yes. Is it time? Yes. How? I would suggest looking at what is already happening and adding the insights that exist and starting from there. That's how I'd answer it. I hope I've answered it.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm reading through a lot of these questions, so apologies if we don't get to you all. Karin, there are a couple of questions specifically related to DEEP. So the first one is, has DEEP been used in besieged or access restricted areas before, and how has it helped improve humanitarian decision making there? And also, can DEEP use analysis for other type of qualitative data other than humanitarian data? So I wonder if you're able to take that, or do you need any more clarifying information from either of our audience members for post there?
Thanks. DEEP could be used for any type of data, and we know actually of some universities that are using DEEP to help their students analyze other types of qualitative narrative data. So yes, we absolutely welcome the DEEP platform to be used also for academic research, more focused on climate analysis, more focused, why not, also on development contexts. So please see how it works and give us feedback. DEEP can be used in any way where there is existing qualitative narrative information about a situation. So yes, you can ingest into DEEP both public information that is out there on humanitarian context, but also on internal data that you have as an organization, and there is no obligation to share it with other organizations, so you can make that project private. We, as Data Friendly Space, we have, for instance, we used DEEP when the Syria-Turkey earthquake happened, and we were providing surge analysis support, for instance, to OCHA and to UNDAC's ANA cell. DEEP today is also used quite heavily in order to do the annual humanitarian needs overviews, whether it's in Somalia or in Syria or in Sudan. So DEEP is used quite heavily as sort of as a part of the global humanitarian needs overview processes. So I think that maybe answers the question. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. Trying to work out where best to go next. There's a couple that really interest me. I'm trying to balance it as best I can. So I'm going to combine a question from Anne and a question from Cynthia. So Anne's question is, in a community where ladies or women are seen as minor, how do we use this information to develop or empower other women? And I'm combining it with Cynthia's question that says, what have you changed your mind on regarding digital inclusion, especially of women and girls in humanitarian work? So I think these are about how do we make sure that digital inclusion is accessible and equitable for women, and how can we empower women? I'm not quite sure who those questions are posed to. Who would like to take those on? And it can be, you can have a couple of responses if you'd like.
Lucy, I don't think the question is very clear for me. Please,
okay.
Go.
So let's take them one at a time. So I think let's take the first question from Anne. So in a community where ladies or women and girls who are seen as maybe more marginalized or more minor, how can we develop and strengthen women through data, digital and technology? That's how I'm interpreting that question. I don't know if, Anne, you wanted to pop either in the chat or in the Q&A box, anything to clarify that question to help our panel.
I could just attempt to answer that. Again, even as a tech professional, whenever I face a challenge or a situation where you need to think of the solution, as one of the panelists mentioned, I try to not first look at it from which technology exists or how can I exactly use technology to solve this problem, but actually just think of what solution is needed, and then now see how technology can address that. In the case of someone has mentioned about communities or contexts where women as regarded as minor. In the case of again, I'll talk a lot about Adesso because for me that is very key. Adesso was started by Degan Ali. Actually, Degan Ali's mother. She's half American, half from the US and half Somali. And that's a context where there are those dynamics. And the problem Degan's mother was actually trying to solve was not one that looked like could use technology. She was literally just trying to support a community that relies a lot on herding goats, right? And cattle. And there's a claim that cattle and goats can really make a place dry. And she was making a case that even before these people were herders, actually the word is herding, before even herding was stopped, these areas were really green. So maybe the problem is not herding, it's how herding is done. And they started doing an experiment where they were working with herders and also like caring about the environment, the climate and all that, and also thinking that this is literally at a time when there's a humanitarian crisis, because that time there was a major drought in Somalia. So she was like doing her work, which was cash transfers, and also using some of the funding because she had a flexible funder to actually support this work. And after some time, one of the organizations, I think it's Oxfam, through their satellite, they noticed that the area where this work was happening was starting to turn green a lot. You see how just just doing their work, somehow technology came in, and that just was able to to show the evidence that how to kind of show the evidence and kind of scale her work. So I feel like when we're thinking about solutions, technology is the technology that works for us should be the technology that works with the solution that we have come up with. And that, I think, when we look at it that way, then we move away a bit from the mindset of yes, I'm victimized, but I refuse to work as a victimized person. I'll come up with a solution and get the technology that will support this. That's how I'd answer it in very many words. Over to you, Lucy.
Brilliant, thank you. There's been a couple of clarifications come in, and there's a couple more questions that I want to pick up around AI potentially in humanitarian. But Kat, there's a question here from Hayam that I think might be kind of obviously is clearly aimed at you. So they ask, do you actually feel that there's an opportunity for local organisations in Gaza specifically to apply for support or partnership with Jangala? I think that's a very specific question, but I was wondering whether you had any kind of initial reactions on that.
Yeah, we have actually tried to work in Gaza before. One of the main challenges is getting our technology across borders. It's incredibly complicated to move technology around like this. And we've actually decided not to work in Gaza at the moment because there's always a weighing up of risk. And that includes the people who help us get the technology out there. So it's a really difficult decision for us. We're a small organization, and we have to work where we think we're going to have the most impact. Also because connectivity can change quite rapidly. So sometimes it might seem very obvious to deploy to like an emergency response scenario. Like we responded to a hurricane last year, and we responded to the hurricane, and the box was actually only useful for a few days because a local organization set up a temporary network and had a very good rapid response, which was brilliant. We're thrilled that they had that. But it just means that we have to do quite a lot of scoping to make sure that the boxes can be used in the best way possible, and we then redeploy if things become less useful. Just on the previous point quickly about like supporting women and girls, I think for me, empowering local communities and empowering women and girls is about education and access. I think I've recently, Jangala works with survivors of domestic abuse, and I've recently been doing research and interviewing them. And I'm very struck by giving somebody a device and connectivity and giving them the opportunity to explore on their own terms can be incredibly powerful. And I think giving people the opportunity to learn how to build their digital skills. We're going to have to keep learning digital skills our whole lives at this point. Like this is going to be constant learning for everyone. And having that access to do it on your own terms can be very powerful. And I think supporting those opportunities for access and education is one of the best ways to support adoption of some of the technologies that Karin and Angelina are talking about.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's a wonderful response. So thank you for sharing that, Kat. And I guess that kind of leads on a little bit to some of the questions that we have around AI and AI with diversity and the gendered lens that we're exploring here today. So, Karin, this feels like maybe a question more aimed at you, but again, please feel free, Kat and Angelina, to respond. How can AI tools kind of almost be, how can they be trained to reflect diversity? I think that Tom's put that really well in the chat. Or even can they?
So the way we are not to go very technical is that the way, for instance, Gannett is built is that we use this method called RAG, which means that we don't just get information from anywhere, but our engineers and our natural language processing engineers are very carefully curating the information. So I think today that is one of the safest techniques and methodologies through which to say that we have a bias-aware AI-powered tool. So, for instance, we pay specific attention that the data sources that we are using include plenty of representation for groups such as adolescents and youth, pregnant and lactating women, unaccompanied and separated children, people with disabilities, elderly, because remember, it's not just about gender, it's also about age and other types of situations. So I think for us, that is what works for us, and that is what the humanitarian sector asks for, that they understand and they understand what the data is and where the data sources are. And I think there was another question also, how user input and user content can be used to inform how AI tools work. I guess here the question is, who's the user? For us, users are humanitarian organizations, which means that every day we get humanitarian organizations coming to us asking us to include certain data sources into the Gannett database so they could query from that database. You often, from local organizations, it's local sources that they trust, because we also want to make sure that people don't go to Gannett and only get outputs from international organizations' data, but also from data that local organizations use at local levels. So this is how we work today, and absolutely that's why we say Gannett is AI by humanitarians, that we are all curating and enriching that database, and therefore enriching the outputs that the AI generates together. So it's not done somewhere behind a closed door. Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think that also possibly partly answers Sylvia's questions around the disadvantages and advantages of AI for and about humanitarian context as well, doesn't it? It is that we need to have a varied data set almost to train that AI. I think that's probably the first thing that comes to my mind with that question. I'm just sort of going through to make sure I've covered as much as I possibly can. I think there is a question from Georgiana for Angelina, who asks specifically about the core humanitarian standards and how they have been used in your work to avoid issues of inaccessibility. Angelina, I don't know if you're willing or able to take that one.
Yeah, I saw that, Georgiana, and I thought it was a really nice one, because I think if these are the frameworks I was talking about, if these frameworks are actually considered from the start, then you'd find that the scaling or the scaling issues would not exist. But unfortunately, humanitarian work has to be collaborative. So probably where I come in, or another person comes in, is not always where you would have wanted to start. So you pick up from where you are. But yeah, just the way they are called humanitarian standards, there are also standards when it comes to building technology, human-computer interaction. There are principles that you use around learnability that Kat has just mentioned, and about usability, about ethics that Karin has mentioned. They already exist, and that's why for me, I always recommend that regardless of the initiative that you're starting, there are already frameworks that exist. It would be great to also, just the way you expect your target users to actually learn about your system, you also learn about the frameworks that exist and see how you can be able to just build on that. So yeah, the projects that I've worked with, not always, but at least when we started using the other frameworks that support our professions and all that, we found that they were working very, very, very hand in hand with the core humanitarian standards. Yeah.
Can I really quickly add to the standards piece? Agree with you, Angelina. And actually, there's so many great opportunities. We're actually looking to gear up some partnership with Sphere to look at how humanitarian, to use artificial intelligence in Gannett to analyze how humanitarian standards can be contextualized, because that is apparently one of the main feedbacks from the Humanitarian Standards Partnership, that yes, we have standards that are set at a global scale. The indicators are a strong suggestion, but they all need to be contextualized to the area where response is taking place. So in some, the standards might be incredibly hard to achieve. In some, it might be a little easier to get to that minimum level of support that provides dignity and care. And actually, having artificial intelligence powered data analysis can help us try and contextualize some of these standards to various humanitarian contexts. So again, actually, there's so many opportunities to empower humanitarian standards, make them a lot more accessible and a lot more relevant and contextual way we work.
Amazing, thank you. I think we've got time for probably one more question that has just been flagged to me, and I think it's a really good question. I think we've kind of touched on it. We're kind of jumping around because there's so many rich threads that we can pull at here. But one final question that's come in from Cynthia, that I do think is worth having a dedicated time to is, what have you changed your mind on regarding digital inclusion, especially from a women and girls in humanitarian perspective? I'd actually love to hear sort of a closing remark from each of you on this question, even if it's just around digital inclusion. I think it would be really interesting to hear from all of you. Is there anything that you've changed your mind on over the years and as technology has and the landscape has evolved? Karin, you're off microphone, so would you like to start us off?
Oh, sorry, should have. I guess maybe from a more sector perspective, remember, because we work with humanitarian organizations, is the data and technology uptake in the sector and the entire data ecosystem of organizations within the humanitarian system is actually really young. It's somebody the other day compared the humanitarian system to a middle-aged person. Since then, I've started to call the data ecosystem as a toddler. So it's a really rapidly growing, but it's still a growing sector within the humanitarian sector, which means that it feels like at least women that are humanitarians, women that want to be in technology, women that want to be in leadership, it's a great opportunity for everyone, because it's wide open for everyone. There's so much change and so much progressiveness. So purely from the women here that want to get into the data and technology space in the humanitarian sector, I feel like it's a great time, even in this really complex time, to be a part of something that is growing and evolving incredibly quickly within our sector. So get involved.
I can follow. One thing I have changed my mind about is about risk. Something that keeps me awake at night is thinking, if we install internet to people who've not used it before, how can we help them stay safe? Like, the internet is a scary place. It's a legitimate concern. And what responsibility do we have? If an internet service provider, do they have a responsibility? If we're a charity, what level of responsibility do we have? How can we do that if we're trying to empower people? What does the role of being paternalistic play in that? And I was talking to somebody recently, thinking about, Karin, your mention of do no harm principles. And they said, well, what's the risk of them not being online? Like, what does that exclude them from? What does that stop them doing? How does that stop them growing and learning and becoming who they are? And I hadn't thought about it in quite those terms before. So I guess it's not a binary shift. I think it's interesting looking at these questions, that they're such great questions and there are no easy answers to a lot of these things. I feel like I'm constantly learning and evolving and growing in this space. And I think something I've changed my mind about is like how I think about risk and how I weigh up the risk of being online with the risk of not getting access to the gift of the online space and the opportunity for empowerment and growth that it can provide.
Yeah. Interesting. I think for me, what I've had to change my mind about is, I think as a person, I like to learn. I like to just pick up all these knowledge nuggets. But the more I work, the more I realize that I actually don't know that much. So for me, one thing I've had to just reset my mind about is about learning. If I'm gonna build any platform and ask anybody to learn about it, then I'm gonna learn first. So it just, for me, it's just knowing that I don't know. And I've had to learn that so many times because I always assume that I know so much, but only find out I don't know. And especially around humanitarian situations again. And and around women and this divide that exists. What the divide that I feel like maybe we could have managed to kind of chip into and actually help to reduce might not be the divide that another person is experiencing. So for me, it's just really knowing that I don't always know, and it's something that I always also advocate for anybody I work with to just go in with that mindset that you might actually have no idea, but you can only bring in what you can. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful. What powerful reflections. So thank you, all three of you. I think I've come away from this conversation feeling a lot more uplifted, certainly. I've come away feeling quite inspired because to talk about different ways of connection and accessing innovation, and what doesn't even seem like innovation almost at times, because when you're in the thick of it, in particular, having access to the internet, having access just to digital, and making sure that the product is designed for the communities that we work with, for humanitarian delivering day in, day out. I think it sometimes feels like we take it for granted. And I think actually just exploring these challenges, thinking about how far we've come in a relatively short space of time as a sector, I think it just gives us a real opportunity to pause, reflect, and say, it's not perfect, but we're trying and we're showing up respectively. And I think certainly, again, at this moment in time, that's something that I'm holding on to very dearly. So thank you for sharing your work, your experiences, and your ideas and thoughts with us today. I hope that the audience here, I hope you've enjoyed listening to Karin, Kat, and Angelina. So I hope that this has been a great learning session. As I sort of said at the start, we will be sharing the slides of the presentations. I think our wonderful speakers have been putting some links in the chat for you to go away and explore these works and explore these resources. And I'm sure they'd be more than welcome to, put some great links to connect with you if you're interested in their work and want to learn and find out more. There's great resources on the websites and on their profiles. So you will get the recording, the slide deck home hopefully by the end of this week, and then early next week you'll be able to claim your HPass badge. Don't forget to please fill in the feedback survey at the end of this webinar. It really does help us kind of learn and sort of figure out what works for you guys. You're a part of our community, and we would want to be able to do something for you. And I was going to say something and it's gone out of my mind. So I'm going to absolutely wrap up. And yeah, I'm sure there will be lots of different webinars and sessions coming out shortly from the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. Please do go and check out some of the resources that we've spoken about, both on websites of these organisations and individuals, and also on the Kaya platform. I've seen a few Kaya courses being shared in the chat as well, so please do have a look at that. It's been a wonderful taking this journey for the last hour and a half with you all, and I wish you all very pleasant days and hopefully speak to you all soon at some point. Thank you very much.